In Final Fantasy XIV, there's something you're going to find yourself doing pretty much all the time. Something that you may even do more than talking to NPCs and watching cutscenes. Walking. This usually isn't a huge problem since you're not that slow, but there exists a diabolical, nefarious, and one might say infernal way to make yourself slower. A way to slash that beloved speed of yours in half with a single button press. RP walking. It exists in most MMOs, and FF14 is no exception to that. In the game, like most others, you can toggle it on for a nice cut to your speed and a snazzy little walk animation. You were never intended to use it to play the game, right? What if you did? What if you tried to play through the game with no mounts, no running, and no flying, at every single moment, even in dungeons and in boss fights, confined to the speed of walking? In this very special FF14 challenge, I'll be playing as Walk Only, a borderline asthmatic Lalafell who's just not cut out for the hustle and bustle of adventuring. Alright, we gotta get the boring stuff out of the way before we can really kick this off. And that means clearing up a few rules. No matter what, we can only get around through walking. Aetherites and transportation NPCs are okay, so stuff like airships, perfectly fine. Mounts aren't allowed, unless we absolutely need them to progress the main story. We always have to be RP walking, pretty obvious. And if for whatever reason, during a solo duty, I have to use the easy mode toggle, I will face a very special punishment, which I'll explain if it ever comes to that. Right, so to start out, I decided that Archer would be the best pick for this character. As a physical ranged, all of our abilities are instant cast. That's very important. It means I can always be walking around. Something that is incredibly important for someone who could move at the limited speed that we'll have. Later down the line, we'll also get Peloton, which is a huge upgrade for an account that can only walk. Now, I've actually never started as an archer before, so I never got to see this fucking super cool scene you get at the start, where you're squaring off against the Ascian. Turns out, it looks dope. Just to start out, we're going to quickly knock out a few side quests. The hope here is that it'll push our level up a bit, so that we won't have to worry about getting interrupted in the middle of doing MSQ by like a level requirement or something. I headed over to the Archers Guild, just to get the first bit of quests from there, since doing the side quests would eventually lead me outside the walls for Granada. After a good bit of side questing, I hit level 8, and I figured this would be more than enough to get started on the MSQ, and so I did. Now, in the middle of grinding through the main scenario, I made probably the biggest blunder imaginable. So the place you're supposed to go for this quest is here. In my infinite wisdom, I decided that the path I should take to get there was through here. I don't know what the hell I was thinking, but it resulted in the very first death of this challenge. Eventually, after taking out a group of Ixal, facing off against a gargoyle, and learning about the drama of the world leaders, we finally find ourselves at the first hurdle of the challenge, Sastasha. It's the first dungeon of the game, and it's an easy one, even if you're limited to walking. It was pretty much the same as it normally is, except I had to walk the whole time. Luckily, the duty support NPCs were more than fine waiting for me to move. I got a little worried near the end that our DPS wouldn't be enough to take out the boss before we were swarmed by Sahagin, but it worked out in the end. Overall, it was pretty easy. After a bit more questing, we're finally on to Tam-Tara Deepcroft. This one, just like Sastasha, didn't have much in it worth noting, except for the last boss. Galvanth the Dominator has a special ability called Mind Blast. It's this circular AoE centered on himself. Now, the benefit of Archer really showed here. It was easy to dodge because I'm ranged. As long as I don't stand near him, I'm good. The next dungeon was going to be Copperbell Mines. Now, this one actually has some meat to it since it was reworked recently. The bosses of this dungeon have actual mechanics. The first boss has these absolutely massive cones to contend with, and a mechanic where he places down 3 huge circular AoEs, leaving only a small portion of the arena as a safe spot. For the first time in the challenge, I felt like I was actually having to try a little bit. I could definitely feel the limitations I had because of my speed. And there were a few times where I very nearly got hit because of it. The second boss has this neat mechanic where it divides itself all across the arena. Each piece of itself that it places in the arena puts out a decently sized AoE that you have to avoid. This one was easier than the first boss. The final boss was a doozy. He had donut AoEs, huge circles, and even cones, but I noticed that he had a clear pattern. Each time he sent out his big circles, he would always follow up with a donut AoE. This fight was a little dicey, but I managed to get through it unscathed. After finishing Copperbell Mines, I was pretty disappointed with the lack of gear we had gotten, so I decided to do something bold, something brave, something I should have done before Sastasha. In Final Fantasy XIV, there's a special place called the Hall of the Novice, where beginners can learn the basics of party-based content. It actually gives you this pretty good armor set with great stats for the level. It's also pretty dripped out. This is in addition to the brand new ring, a special ring that'll give you increased XP gain up until level 30. Optimally, I should have done this way earlier, but I decided to get it done now so we can get ourselves some better gear. For someone with nearly 10,000 fucking hours, this was pretty easy to get through. Who would have guessed? After a bit of work, we had ourselves the brand new armor set, and this is going to be pretty good going forward. That's going to wrap things up for our first episode. In the next one, we're going to have drama, triumph, and our first primal, Ifrit.